Black Rabbit is a Netflix show starring Jude Law and Jason Bateman as dysfunctional brothers. Jude Law is trying to open a new bar on top of one he already runs called the Black Rabbit. Jason Bateman is a screw up trying to pay off debts to the wrong people and get his life together. The show is pretty well constructed. It uses a flash forward at the beginning to show the Black Rabbit getting robbed during a big party. The characters are very well established. You understand who they are almost immediately. And while the show is very competent and well made, I would even say it's a good show overall. I don't know if I would recommend it just because it's kind of frustrating to watch. Every person in the show is just not a very good person, so you end up with not really having anyone to root for. A lot of shows balance this out by having a morally good person be an antagonist, but then it still works when your protagonist who's an asshole gets their comeuppance. The first couple episodes of this show led me to believe that it was going to have a dynamic between Jason Bateman and Jude Law, sort of like the main characters of the Gentleman TV show, where you have one brother who has his shit together, he does the right things, and then one who's a mess, who's kind of your instigator and driver of the plot because their bad decisions create all the problems they have to deal with. But what you find out by episode 3 is that they're both completely dysfunctional. It just manifests differently. And it's just sort of frustrating because the characters that you want to root for just make bad decisions over and over. Even though I do like the idea of two people who are dysfunctional being dysfunctional in totally different ways in their relationship. All that stuff is really interesting. The way it impacts the people around them very negatively is not glorified at all. They're just screw ups. Jude Law and Jason Bateman are both very good actors, and they both do a really good job in this show, along with all the other actors that I'm not familiar with, but it just doesn't make for an enjoyable watch. If you want to be optimistic about it and charitable, you could say that the message or the main theme is that it's never too late for redemption, but I think that would be pretty generous given how the sort of bittersweet positive ending is just kind of tacked on to what's really a downer of a show. So let's just get into it. So like I mentioned, we start with a flash forward and we see Jake Friedkin, who's Jude Law, celebrating the success of his bar, the Black Rabbit, very high class spot in New York City. And he's also wanting to buy out another bar and expand as well. During the toast, they get robbed, and then we go back a month to the events that led up to the robbery at the Black Rabbit. And I'll give the show props. The way that it reframes the robbery with the events that lead up to it is really well done. Unlike a certain alien-based show that just ended on Hulu, where we got an entire flashback episode that changed nothing except to make the characters even stupider. We see Jason Bateman, who plays Vince Friedkin, Jake's brother, is out in Nevada. He's trying to sell a guy some coins. The guy tries to rob him, and he ends up running over him with his car because he's pissed off, and then fleeing back to New York City to get his brother's help. He's got no money. He's a complete degenerate, abandoned his daughter who doesn't like him anymore. He used to be part owner of the Black Rabbit, but because of his gambling and drug addictions, gave it up and just let Jake take it over, at least in practicality. We find out pretty quickly that Vince is in six-figure debt to Babbitt and Jr., a couple local gangsters, and he fled town to try to avoid them. Obviously, as soon as he's back in town, they're on his ass. Vince is trying to bum money from Jake, asking him to get it out of the business, and you can tell he's just a low-life, degenerate loser. And this circle happens over and over, where Vince either has the money or says he has the money. We see him gambling and he's up over $150,000 so he could actually pay off the debt if he wanted to, but then of course loses it all. They end up actually cutting off his finger. Obviously they mean business. And after this first 2 episodes of this looping, and you see Jake has an ex-wife, but he seems to be close to his kid. He has the business he's put together. He's trying to open another restaurant. It's very easy to think that he's the good one and he just can't cut off his brother because he loves him and his family. Jake even goes so far as to talking to the gangsters to set up a payment plan of 20 grand a week to try to pay off Vince's debt. So obviously he loves his brother very much and he's doing everything he can to help him restart his life and hopefully get his shit together. And then episode 3 rolls around. You find out that he decides to fire his bartender because she's refusing to come to this big event, and he didn't realize that she had been drugged and raped by one of their regulars, which you actually find out later on that he knew and deleted the security cam footage to put on a thumb drive for blackmail at a later time. His chef asks him to ban this guy from the bar, once he finds out about the roofing and raping, and he agrees and then sees the guy and just lets it go. They hold a fake fundraiser for high school kids that he intends to use to pay off Vince's debt, and he tells his chef that he'll get rid of Vince completely from the Black Rabbit, which he then doesn't do. And on top of that, he uses the fake fundraiser money to pay off the restaurant itself because he had been skimming off the top to maintain this lifestyle and image, and he couldn't go after the new restaurant without the books being organized. And this is also where we see him delete the security cam footage of the roofing. So he's just on a roll here. And he really only reaches out to this girl to try to keep the image of the Black Rabbit intact so she won't go to the media. And this kind of lying and manipulating just go on and on for the rest of the season. Vince and Jake have this conversation about running the Black Rabbit together. And they're both saying that if they're going to lie to everyone else, they can't lie to each other while they're lying to each other. The poor girl that got raped ends up dying because Vince accidentally gives up her name when he's being interrogated. Vince and Jake put together a scheme to burn their own house down for the insurance money. They finally end up paying off their debt, but because that girl is dead, they get interrogated and they're both going to be executed. At which point Jake says that they can rob the Black Rabbit the night of the event because he's going to have millions of dollars in jewelry and stuff there that's not normally there, and he will assist with it if they leave him alone. At which point, Vince and Jake get into a huge fight. They're both blaming each other for all the lies and their fuck-ups and all the problems that they've both caused each other. And at this point, they go their separate ways. And this all eventually leads back to the robbery the night of the event. And you find out that Vince is actually one of the two robbers. Junior had been condemned for his issues. He was supposed to leave town. He ignored his dad. And the whole thing is just an absolute mess. Vince ends up shooting Junior and taking the jewels. So now, obviously, the gangsters are all after him, because it doesn't take long for them to figure out who did it. And you find out that the gangster that's after them actually helped hide the body of their dad because Vince dropped a bowling ball on his head when he was abusing their mom and killed him. He never told Jake, but Jake knew anyway. A lot going on. Ends up leading to Vince getting a friend killed. He calls the police to turn himself in. And then he ends up confessing to all the crimes because they're wanted and killing himself by jumping off the roof. Jake ended up putting his ex-wife and son in danger. Vince's daughter was in danger. They got their friend killed that Jake already took his girlfriend. They really just made a mess of everything. But Vince killed himself so that his brother could have a safe life without worrying, without being dragged down by him. And Jake settles back into just being a regular waiter and living a life within his means, regardless of his image. There's a little bit of Netflixery throughout, where the black lesbian in an interracial relationship and the black gay dude are the only morally good people, and I guess the Asian cop lady. Everyone else is a total asshole. And the whole story is really just their lives spiraling out of control, and every time they have a chance to fix it, they make a bad decision. It is a bit of a weird one for me where the bad decisions are their character flaws just ramped up to 11. It's not like bad decisions in a horror movie where they do things that are very obviously stupid. They do things that are obviously stupid because they can't help themselves and it's just who they are. They're dysfunctional people. I think for me, the show would have been more enjoyable if there had been one core character that you could really root for. But even the chef lady who's trying to take the business from Jake kind of does it in a sneaky way. You find out that he's the one who got her in this position in the first place. And yeah, she's probably in the right because he does so much stuff and he's let it run wild. He's just not a good guy. It also doesn't make her super easy to root for. She's just kind of annoying and self-righteous. I think another way to do it that's a bit more enjoyable is if you have the bad guys be so bad that they're going up against that you can still root for the main character despite them being an asshole. But they don't really do it that way because the bad guys are just so overwhelming them with force that they don't really fight back at all. They just kind of get treated like shit the whole time by them. It isn't like Breaking Bad or something where you can root for Walter because he's going against the cartel up to a certain point. Obviously, for people, that's going to be different points. In that show where you stop rooting for him, but this show never even really reaches that point of you rooting for them. Any goodwill for Jake is gone by episode 3. So it's really a show where you're just watching people blow their lives up over and over. And when Vince says at the end that he wants to free his brother from the burden of dealing with him and he kills himself, the show frames it as the right decision. And it's kind of hard to disagree because of how much of a screw up he is the entire time. So while it's sad and you can feel bad for him, it doesn't really come across as a sympathetic tragedy. It's just sort of a miserable one to watch. So yeah, overall, like I said, I think it's a very well-made show. They do a lot of neat little foreshadowing, like where Jake is holding the bowling ball in the house before they burn it down. And you find out later that's the bowling ball that was used to kill their abusive father. There's a bunch of neat little stuff in there. It's definitely a well-crafted show, but it is just not a very fun show to watch. I'd probably never watch it again. I think you definitely have to be in a certain type of mood for this show. I'm going to leave it there for this one. I don't want to keep going on about it. It's only 8 episodes if you want to check it out. It's not like it's a huge time sink, but I think you should know what you're getting into, which is kind of a downer. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. Try to respond to the comments that aren't just insults. Like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.